Hey, this is Mark Washington here at Cap One as Georgetown defeats American 88-83 at halftime. There is quite a bit to unpack. The Warriors was led by Jaden Epps' 31 points. Dontrez Styles had 22 to back up that 31. On the AU side, they had such balanced scoring, but Matt Rogers led them with 17 points and 9 rebounds. And they had three guys had 12 apiece, and Elijah Stevens, Lincoln Ball, and Jeff Sprouse. Well, Georgetown, this was one of these games that, to be honest with you, under the old regime, they probably would have lost. That they would pull out a win today. I would say that maybe the bulk of the game, you could argue that American looked like they were in control. But I think this is one of these games where you see where coaching matters, where instead of guys panicking or guys with this woe is me or guys saying, here we go again, you saw some internal fortitude where guys dug down deep and more importantly, trust each other. And that's what you saw with Epps, and that's what you saw with Styles, guys who have been carrying the water for this team offensively that you never saw out of Primo Spears and Brandon Murray, who in situations like that, it became, the curse of meism. Well, let me do it. And then if it doesn't happen, doesn't happen. These guys play within a team structure. Their teammates recognized that they were hot. And then after that, they fed them, but it was all kind of in the structure of what Coach Cooley wants to do, as opposed to guys just going off on their own plan and their own agendas. So that was refreshing to see. But of course, the big question is always going to be around Epps' shot that tied the game. And I asked both coaches, what did you see and what was it? With Coach Simpkins, I asked, did he want to foul? And he said his answer was, we were in zone, probably should have been in man and switch, but we were in zone and there was some space. And he thought that Rogers on the closeout could have fouled, but he wondered if Rogers was just worried about fouling the act of shooting, so he didn't foul at all. And Epps made the shot, whereas Cooley talked about how, because of how AU played them, they ran a screen that gave them enough room where they couldn't stick to Epps around the action, which is kind of what I saw. And then he gets the open look. And then, of course, he has to make it. It's great for coaches to draw stuff up, but you got to have the guys make it. And Epps made it like a regular shot. Now, what didn't get asked and probably should have gotten asked was on the final play. American did not have final play regulation. American didn't have any timeouts left. And they push the ball up. They don't get off a shot in time, not because they couldn't have. It's because Stevens, who I believe was the one with the ball, really tried to do too much, because he really could have shot it over Brumbaugh and decided to try to get to the basket. There wasn't enough time to get to the basket. The other thing he could have done was, with Georgetown in retreat in transition and really staring at the ball, to his right was Matt Rogers, who was already running to a spot for a three. That may or may not have gotten off. I think it would have had a chance to get off, and he just wasn't looking. So Stevens took it. And that's a mismanagement of time. I'm going to trust that late game situations are practiced at AU, like in every gym, and a lot of the practices does have, hey, look, we have X amount of seconds left. We need to go court, sideline to sideline, either from a dead ball on an inbounds or a made free throw. I know at the high school I coached at previously, we did it off of a made free throw where, there's all these scenarios, whether you have timeouts left, whether it's 5 seconds left, whether it's 7 seconds left. The idea that AU didn't get off a shot, it would have been different to get off a shot and just missed it. But AU didn't get off a shot at the end of regulation and let this game go into overtime was a mismanaged. Everyone's going to talk about the foul thing of not fouling Fs, but it was just as important that after that, in a scramble situation, which that was, and a lot of coaches like to take advantage of a scramble situation. Think about North Carolina when they beat Kentucky. Malik Monks hits the big three. North Carolina takes advantage of a scramble situation and gets a good look. AU could have gotten that same look, but again, not aware of time and trying to do too much with the ball allowed Georgetown to survive regulation without AU even taking a shot at the end. So, and that was one of the things that wasn't asked in there. But again, the Epps thing, I definitely wanted to ask both coaches about what their actions were and how they played it. And both of them answered the questions, and it's somewhat symmetrical of what they saw. You know, Coach Simpkins kind of second guessing what he should have done, while Coach Cooley was saying that they got the look that they exactly wanted. Georgetown led by one in the first half, 35-34. And I thought in the first half, it was interesting that Mutombo was the first sub off the bench when they took off Supreme Cook to get a big body on Rogers. Now, that was the last time we saw Mutombo, but he got in there and immediately Simpkins went to Webb. And so you had those kind of big backup guys going at each other. And Fielder did end up checking in later, but I found it interesting that Cooley, when he checked Fielder in, that he checked it in with Cook. And because of that, that kind of got Fielder off of the big. And then it goes back to what I talked about in the pregame, which was Fielder's struggles at time guarding guys with the ball that are on the perimeter. Foot speed, angles. He doesn't have his angles yet, and that's going to be important for him to learn as he gets older. Remember now, he's only a freshman, but he does not have good defensive angles when he's out on the perimeter, which is why he gets in foul trouble a lot. He got 3 fouls today in 13 minutes, but I will say this: his energy, his doggedness, his pursuit of the ball on rebounds, his wanting to challenge was much better than what I have seen the last 3 games. Because the last 3 games, he's looked unsure. Yesterday, he looked unsure in help defense. He looked unsure when his guy got the ball on the perimeter, knowing that that guy was going to attack. He looked unsure on those things. He didn't look as unsure today, which meant that he got on the boards when he needed to get on the boards. He tried to keep balls alive. And again, doesn't mean he was perfect, because he was not perfect. But what it did mean was he was making an impact on the game, and certainly useful with his 5 points and 5 rebounds, something that'll get overlooked. I also thought in overtime that Georgetown played like the team that didn't expect to be in overtime, meaning I thought we were going to lose this before we got to overtime. And they played with more of a defensive intensity in overtime. Now, AU sort of played like the team, and you look at their body language, they play like a team like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect for us to be in overtime. You know, and they were playing at the beginning of overtime where like a team that was still thinking about what happened at the end of regulation. And so they went 1 for 6 in overtime after shooting so well, especially in the second half. But I felt like a lot of that was holding on. It was holding on. It was the inability to put it past you. Whereas Georgetown used it like, hey, man, we might not have thought we've been here, but we're here now. And they did take advantage. They had all the energy in overtime after, again, it seemed like AU had a lot of energy in the second half. Now, Georgetown, when you look at the turnovers, they had 11 turnovers today. And let me tell you, it felt like more than 11 turnovers. Now, the last 2 games coming in today, they had a combined 41 turnovers. 21 against Rutgers, and then 20 yesterday against Mount St. Mary's. It got down to 11. But here's the thing about the 11. The majority, and when I go back and watch these games, I will take a look. The majority of those 11 seemed like they were live ball turnovers, which gave AU time to run out. And it's part of the reason, not all of the reason, but it's part of the reason why AU ended up with 26 fast break points. Now, some of those came off misses, of course, but some of those were on turnovers where Rowan Brumbaugh looked like he was a little unsure of advancing the ball, and Jay Neps at times trying to split 2 and just like one dribble too many. And then those things cause turnovers. And I still don't understand why, when any team traps, especially in 1-2-2, why Georgetown's first pass is up against the freaking sideline. I just don't get it. Now, Cooley talked about it in post game. Yes, there's always a guy behind, which is where that pass should go. If I get it and I see it coming, and they're going to be in rotation, 1 or 2 guys are going to be open. The guy behind or the guy up the sideline. One of those 2 are going to be open. But what has frequently happened with the Georgetown guards, and why you're seeing the turnovers when teams are pressing in zone press, is because they get it and it's like they hold it. And they're looking to see where the defense is going. So now the defense is dictating. Well, once you stunt and take something away and you've held, Now the trap is there. And then when you look at Georgetown's guards and their size, the trap get there. Now, what do you think is coming next? What you've seen. You've seen a bunch of turnovers. I also have not seen, and heaven did for me, to criticize, but I don't understand when that press is coming hard and that trap is coming hard, why there is never a retreat dribble. There's never a retreat dribble. And that's the other thing, especially when you have short guards. That's the other thing you can go to is a retreat dribble. So you can change the angles of the trap. So now maybe they reach, or now you can attack a hip or a shoulder and they ride you and you get a foul called on them. There are things, but what you can't do, and what Georgetown's got to get out of the habit of doing, is catching it and looking like a deer in headlights and holding it until the trap comes. And that's part of the reason why they end up with so many maddening turnovers, especially in the backcourt. Once again, Georgetown shot the ball well. And this is one of the things that I have found interesting in the first two games dealing with the Hoyas, which is you erase some of these turnovers and you look at their shoot percentages and the looks they're getting in their actions. Guys, they are getting excellent looks. When they're running that little floppy action, the guy comes off and he gets to the corner, but that's setting up another guy come to the other corner off of a double screen. That's open almost every time. You've seen Heath get open threes on it. You've seen Styles get open threes on it. That action has been money for Cooley. So again, they shot going into overtime. So Georgetown shot 50% in the first half, 50% in the second half. They shot roughly 43% in the overtime. They are getting good looks. They are scoring on that side of the floor with an undersized. I'll say this, with an undersized big, with a team that has not seen each other, with so many new guys have not seen each other till this year, and a backup big who's only a freshman. When you look at all of those things, the idea that they're generating looks, the looks that they're generating, if you are a Georgetown fan, this is something that you did not see the last 6 years. This is something, when I talked about before the season, that I was looking this season for things that you can build on and sustain more than wins and losses. This is what I'm talking about. Those actions, the unselfishness, the guys running around screens hard, making sure they're getting over, those are things that are sustainable. And then those are things that become part of the culture. And now that's when you truly see change in a program, not 4 magical nights in New York. Okay. And Georgetown is doing those things. The guy clean up the stuff defensively. I thought Matt Rogers was great. Now he's a veteran, all conference player. He was 6'4", 11 from the floor. He had 17 points, 9 rebounds. But the thing was is that he recognized everything. He made plays for AU. That was the right play that led to so much for so many other people. And that's the type of big that Georgetown desires. And maybe down the line, Fielder becomes that big, or they bring a big that becomes that big. That guy that even when you see a 17-9 book, your stat line, 17-9, you think that's impressive. You sit around there and say, man, he was 17-9 tonight. And that doesn't tell you how good he was. And that's where Georgetown and those guys are working towards, and that's what Cooley's working towards with recruiting. But man, AU has it. AU had a staff, and this was, I'm going to give Patrick Stevens credit when we were sitting in our media seats. One of the things he said is, you can see a team out there where everyone from AU, all 5 guys, have played together. And you look at the Georgetown guys, no fault of their own, but they weren't 5 guys who have played together. They're 5 guys who are still learning each other, which is what makes this win even more impressive. Because those 5 guys that have played together before, they came here last year and won. They walked into this gym expecting to win. When they went up 10 with around 4 something left, oh, no. All the body language said, we're going to win this one again. So for Georgetown to have a bunch of guys who are still learning each other, with that adversity going down the stretch, and to be able to pull together, yes, they were riding a hot hand, but be able to pull together, because with that hot hand, you got to get stops. And they got stops. And yes, I do feel, and I'm not going to sit here and complain about the refereeing, but there were some calls I would question a little bit guarding the post, especially prior to the ball being thrown there, with how the whistle was rather inconsistent. And so if I was Coach Cooley, who was literally out on the court complaining about those, I don't blame him. I would have complained about them too. But I thought, again, Georgetown had adversity and they persevered through adversity. And it wouldn't be a little thing if the last 6 years wouldn't happen. But because those last 6 years happened, this is not a little thing. It's a step forward for this program, even though you can say, well, it's American University, blah, blah, blah. We're not there yet where you can say, well, it's insert team name, because this stuff is starting from the very beginning. So we're not there yet, but what you have seen with Georgetown is some step forward, and there's going to still be some rough nights, but certainly on a back-to-back, something that's rare in college, on a back-to-back to come away with 2 wins, with one win being in heavy adversity is a step in the right direction for this program. So we will see Georgetown again next Saturday against Jackson State. You will see me again Tuesday, when University of Maryland takes the floor back home. Again, I'm trying to think who they're playing on Tuesday, and it escapes me, but I don't think anyone on this podcast really cares who Maryland is playing on Tuesday. This is Marcus Washington from MTC Media. You guys have a good evening.